Hello, thank you for tuning in to the Football and Feelings podcast with me, Liam Masters, speaking to Carl Donnelly today, the comedian, prolific podcaster as well. We spoke about both of those things on today's show, as well as a bit about veganism, meditation, and his general mental health, sort of how he gets through the day-to-day, and how he's doing. Really great chat. Again, I'll post links in the description to mental health charities, and to Carl's and our channel as well, so give them a follow. Thank you very much. Cheers. How you getting on in lockdown though?
All right, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because me and my wife got a kid on the way next month.
Oh, congratulations.
No, cheers. Yeah, but if that's sort of given us, it means we've got a lot to do. So, we've been busy sorting out the place and getting everything we needed. And it's actually been quite a nice distraction. Imagine if people just haven't got much on their plate, and they're just not working. Then that's when people feel lost, don't they? And totally 100%. Aimless. Whereas actually, the moment gigs stopped, suddenly me and Hannah were just here. We realised, we've got a massive list of things to get on with. And it's just kept us busy, really.
Yeah, I feel a bit bad for sort of enjoying it. Obviously, like you said, other people are proper struggling, but where I live anyway, I'm at my parents during lockdown, and it's just like a bit of a middle class old people haven near the seaside. So the weather's been nice. If it wasn't for the weather, it would have been a bit annoying. But I feel bad for enjoying it.
I think so. I mean, I understand. I think a lot of people have that sense. So I think a lot of people are sort of enjoying it in the sense that they've realised a lot of the things they were doing probably weren't that important to them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I didn't realise how, I'm always out. I'm just always out and about. During the day, I gig in the evenings. But even if I'm gigging in the evenings, I'm always out just meeting mates for coffee and stuff, which is nice. But I've realised that it's not as necessary as I thought.
You could do it on Zoom, mate.
Exactly.
That's the way forward. You're not going to see anyone for months, even after this finishes. Just be having little coffees on Zoom. Have you adopted a Bundesliga team for the time being?
I haven't actually. I'm still I'm not particularly missing football as much as some, and I think that comes down to being a Spurs fan and the fact that we were on. This has been since they sacked Pochettino. It's been my least enjoyable season probably since the very early 2000s. It's just it's since pre Martin Jol. I think this last sort of year has been my least favourite as a Spurs fan. So I mean, another benefit of the coronavirus is that it just put a forced break into what was a really depressing period of time for Spurs fans.
Yeah, you're getting your Amazon series as well this season.
I mean, I'm not going to go anywhere near that. I mean,
I can't imagine what it's going to to be. It's half a season of football and Poch getting sacked.
It's horrendous. I still sort of. I think because of everything that's happened, I've sort of forgotten about it a lot. But when they sacked Pochettino, that was the single worst moment as a Spurs fan in my lifetime. I know some people wanted him to go and whatever, and there's moments that individually are worse. I mean, in that Champions League final, the penalty. I mean, there's moments that make you just go, shit. But actually, there's not that. I mean, in terms of moments that have made me sad, that was the moment. That was something broke, and I've just not really. I'd say it's not fully repaired yet.
Yeah, but same for my friends, actually. I've got quite a few friends who are Tottenham fans, and exactly the same. When Poch got sacked, they were like, what is the point? If we can't sort of repay someone who's been that loyal to us and helped us so much without backing, why? What? I don't understand. It just didn't make sense.
No, it was horrendous. I cancelled I'm not a season ticket holder because I travel too much to be one. It'd just be utterly pointless. But I'm a member, so I still go to the matches when I can and stuff. And I cancelled my membership that night when I got the news that he was sacked. I just cancelled it. I was like, I'm done, mate. That's me. For a while, I need to take a break because that is not what I want. I don't want us to be fucking Man City or, I don't. I like the fact we've, we are a big club. We've got a massive stadium now,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I do feel like we've done it in a better way than a lot of clubs. It
Yeah.
has been a gradual build in the last 20 years. You know what I mean? Since that sort of when we were just shit, man, in the late 90s. Oh man, it was crap. You know what I mean? Sort of the 90s were a rough decade, and I think that sort of gradual thing when we suddenly had a couple of seasons when in the mid 2000s where we finished fifth, and that after the decade before it, that was so nice to have just a bit of consistency. And that just built from there and from there. And it felt like, I never thought we'd get to a Champions League final, don't get me wrong. But the fact that even in the last sort of 7 or 8 years, we started to sniff around. Obviously, we started sniffing around the top four, and then we got into the top four, and then we started sniffing around. We could theoretically have a little title push if we really went on a good run. And that, just feelings like that, I never thought I'd have. And I suppose that is the problem. There comes a point where you're like, I understand the business side of it. They want to naturally progress. But the moment they got rid of Pochettino and went for Mourinho, you can see so black and white what they want behind closed doors. That for me, I was like, that feels like that just feels a bit grotty.
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan, and I think my proudest period as an Arsenal fan was probably when we weren't really spending any money, but we were consistently getting Champions League. There's something about it, knowing that the people behind the scenes have kept some sort of value there, rather than just getting another investor and just buying a £70 million player.
And I think a lot of that, I think a lot of what I always, obviously Arsenal and Spurs have a innate dislike, that's rivalry. But, I would challenge you to find a Spurs fan who secretly in their heart wasn't massively jealous of what you had with Wenger. Just that stability and consistency, and the fact that you just had a manager who seemed to care and love the club and have a nurturing attitude towards the players and the young players and all that. It was, it had it's the Alex Ferguson thing as well, isn't it? You want that for a club. You don't want just some mercenary coming in every couple of years. And I think that's what with Pochettino, it felt like we'd finally found ours,
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. It was like you were just getting attached to him, fully, like he was part of the club's history. And
definitely,
unreal.
And then so I think that's why for me, I feel like I'm on a sort of hiatus. I say that, I mean, I ordered 2 baby Spurs suits for my soon to be arriving child. So I mean, I'm not totally giving up on it, but
of course,
I can't foresee me having the love of it for at least another season, or it might even be till Mourinho ends up obviously inevitably going in about a year or two. It might take till then for me to fully be back in love with them. But
yeah, I've definitely enjoyed not having my weekends just ruined by a shit result.
That's true, actually. I think there is something about that I've not even thought about in terms of it really affects. And again, weirdly, I've sort of had that one slight relief since Pochettino went and Mourinho came in. Is I've not had that feeling. I've not had that feeling of going to a gig on Saturday night miserable because Spurs lost or gave away a last minute goal, whatever. And I suppose there is something to be said for slightly losing your investment in football.
Yeah, definitely. Have you been doing many online gigs? I can't imagine how different that is because you're not able to sort of read the audience and sort of connect with people.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually done a fair few now. I was really cynical at the start, and I put them off for a while, but I finally sort of agreed to one about a month ago, and actually, it was really fun. What they do is they sort of basically they get the audience and they mute everyone apart from 10, which they essentially create a front row,
right?
And then they put the comedian on spotlight, so that means the camera's not jumping around to whoever's speaking, so everyone's just watching you, but they can hear the laughter of them people that are unmuted, and so can you when you're performing. So it ends up giving that slight, responsive thing of it. So I found them actually once they worked out how to do them, they've become pretty decent now, and they run pretty smoothly.
How is that changing your set then? Because in terms of you can't really rely on, like you said, that other people are muted. Is it more like
Yeah.
more story based or like?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I've found. Me and I know a lot of comics have said the same thing. They tend to go to stories more than quick bits because
Mm,
it's also, you are still ultimately, as stand up always is, you're having a one-way conversation, but you're making it look like it's a conversation.
yeah.
But I think, yeah, it's definitely feels more when you're sitting at your desk doing it. It definitely feels more like there's not much performance in it. So I find myself definitely telling slightly longer stories and yeah, being a bit more slow and yeah, just chatty with it.
Mm. How did you get into comedy? Because that's a sort of an unconventional route, I guess you could say. Like, did you always know that was something you wanted to do, or did you just
Not at
fall into it?
all. No, I fell into it. I didn't do any performance or anything at school. I was pretty shit at school and just like bummed around and did enough
Mm,
sort of to get a few GCSEs and here and there. And yeah, I didn't really have any direction. I always loved comedy though. I loved sort of sketch and stand up stuff. I'd always watch. Yeah, I loved it on telly. And yeah, I like people like Dave Allen and Billy Connolly and people growing
mm,
up. But I didn't really know anything about it. And it wasn't until probably very early 20s when I went to a comedy club for the first time, just like pure by chance. I think my ex wife, she took me there when we were just starting to go out with each other. And then she loved stand up and she'd been to watch like things at the Edinburgh Fringe, which I'd never even heard
mm.
of. And then yeah, she just took me to a comedy club, and I loved it. Like, I couldn't believe, what I was seeing. It was so much fun, and everyone was sort of there for the same reason, and the comedians were just funny, and the comedians also looked like they were having like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So I've never really seen that live, because normally when you watch it on telly, it's a big shiny stage, and the audience are quite far away, and it's funny, but it looks quite theatery, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Whereas
Detached.
whereas a comedy club, I lived in a pub for a bit. My parents ran a pub for a bit when I was young, so I love the feel of pubs and that sort of
Mm,
smelly, grotty feel. And I think comedy clubs have that. There's a sort of dirtiness to them. You feel like you're in a sort of basement chatting about stuff that you couldn't say outside.
yeah.
So I just fell in love with it, and yeah, within about a year, I started contemplating giving it a go, even though I was shit scared, man, because I've never done any performing at all. I didn't even like reading out loud in school, sort of thing.
Mm,
And then just yeah, my girlfriend then at the time, she signed me up to a comedy workshop because she knew I was a bit interested but didn't know where to start. And I just went and popped along that for a few weeks, and that just sort of gave me the kick up the arse to try it. And when I did, I just fell in love with it instantly.
yeah, because it's such a different thing. Like someone being funny and then being professionally funny. Like it feels like there's a big gap there. It's a bit like in football, like people say, can they do it on a rainy night in
Yeah,
Stoke?
yeah,
Can they do
yeah.
it on a Thursday night at Birmingham Glee Club? But how do you get to that? I presume were you a funny person before, or did like yeah? I'm
I
trying to get
don't.
my head around that.
I think like it's different. It's a hard one to like, this explain because I think you know I think we all know funny people. In my circle of friends that I grew up with and I'm still friends with, I we were all pretty funny. We were all quite a laugh, and we all make each other laugh all the time. But I wouldn't say I was never the one who'd hold court, or I don't
Mm,
think I was the funniest or but I'd say is it the difference between somebody who's just funny with their mates and in conversation to somebody who's got a mind that can take something and turn it into a bit of stand up. And you've got to have an element of being funny, but you also just need to be able to see, like, why would that be funny to 400 strangers on a Saturday night? So you've got to
mm,
have that slight creative writing element of it, I suppose, of being able to take something that is just a funny idea and making it into a routine that gets across to enough people that they can see it when you're telling it. So
yeah.
it's just that's the difference. That's why when people like see a comedian they don't like, they'll see that and think, "Oh, that's shit," and my mate's funnier than that. And it's like, well, of course your mate's funnier than that to you because he's your mate,
Mm.
and you've got a similar sense of humor. You've just seen somebody who didn't have the sort of humor you like, but You know, it's actually, if you put their mate on stage up against that other person, the other person
Yeah,
would
they
clearly
die
be
on
more.
stage.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because not all the time, some people do just have a natural affinity to it, but the overwhelming majority of people who are funny with their mates won't make stand-up comedians.
Hmm. Can you practice at home, or is it too hard really to replicate? Does it have to be through persistent gigging?
I think you can if you've got a certain style of stand-up, which is, you know, if your stand-up is very written and very scripted, and you know, I think then you can just practice the sort of rhythm of it and
Mm.
learning what you want to say. If you're somebody who's a bit more freewheeling and sort of plays off the audience, and you just can't, like I've never ever been able to, just because I think if I think it would be detrimental to me if I practiced at home, because my whole thing and what I love about it is that thing that every gig is different. Every gig is a live experience with a group of people that you'll never meet again. Now, you might meet individuals, they might come to different shows, but you'll never meet that exact group of people again in your entire life. So naturally, I think I like to treat every gig as this is a one-off event.
Yeah, that's a nice way to look at it. Do you still feel pressure when you perform, or do you get used to that and the nerves go? Or
Yeah, you do, but there's different pressure for different gigs and different
mm,
things as well. Like I always find, um, you know, like if I'm doing Edinburgh or tour show or something where it's just me, that's when I feel my most pressure. I think, you know, because the whole night stands and falls on you and that audience and what they think of you. So you know, if you have a bit of a ropey tour show, that will hit you more than any other bad gig, because that's all you. You've
mm,
basically, you know. But if you're doing say the Birmingham Glee, you know, on a Saturday or Friday night, that's a big room. There's 400 people, whatever, in that room. It's a brilliant comedy club. So like everything's in your favour. It's built perfectly. They're all looking at you.
mm,
It's like everyone's like on good behaviour and up for a good night. You know, the pressures there are different and based. I often find that the pressure of when you're on the bill is the biggest thing on those sorts of gigs, where, you know, if I'm closing it, for like, I mean, because it's not really, people think if you're on last, you're the headliner, but actually in the UK, we don't particularly have that in the major comedy clubs. Comedy clubs have, everyone's just doing the same length of time and you're all pretty much as good as each other. But yeah, slightly smaller clubs have a headliner where you do a bit longer and that. But yeah, if you're closing like the Glee or the Comedy Store or something, the
mm.
pressure there is, well, they've watched three brilliant comedians already. The pressure is I can't be the shittest one. I can't be the one to let the sort of consistency slip. Whereas if you're on first, the pressure is they're not going to be at their peak of warming up. You know, you get the audience probably at their slightly coldest of the night.
Mm.
Um, if you're in the middle, it's the easiest spot. So part of you, the pressure is, well, I have to really be shit to mess this up. So every spot has a different right. Weirdly, the spot I always find the least pressured, and some people would have the opposite, but is hosting. I find hosting really fun, and
Mm.
I find when I'm hosting, I almost treat it like I've got a night off and I'm just having a chat and a laugh, and I don't feel as much pressure as when I do a set, which is probably, yes, that's what I do quite a lot of that, and I used to do a lot of it, but I think that's because of that. I find it very freeing and fun. So yeah, the pressure's
Yeah.
always different based on when you're on and things like that.
I've definitely noticed that. I've been to a few Just the Tonic events, and there's been a few times where the compare has been not only the funniest person there, but like so obviously the most relaxed act. Like they just
Yeah,
come on, throw a few jokes around, fuck around with the audience, and then just introduce the next person. You can tell they're not feeling the pressure to be better than the last person that was on,
yeah,
or
yeah,
back and
yeah.
forth.
And the pressure as well is like a lot of you. Basically, a lot of people when they're newer, a lot of comedians who haven't done much comparing, they find it really scary, and they think the pressure is all on you because you're the one holding the show together, and you've got to
Mm,
set it up and do the admin, and like there's a lot of pressure. But actually, you talk to anyone who's done a lot of comparing and actually does it regularly, and basically they'll tell you that the secret that you learn really early doors when you start hosting shows is the reason that you can actually relax the most and take the pressure off is because most weekend comedy clubs, you know, a good, I'd say over half of the audience, if they're not regular comedy goers, won't think you're a proper stand-up comedian if you're hosting. They think you're just, oh, he's the guy who's hosting because he's not a proper stand-up.
He owns the club.
Yeah, they'll think they'll have some idea about what you're there for, and that's why you always get the most compliments when you're hosting from those people, because they'll come up to you afterwards and go, "Oh, you were the funniest. I don't know why you don't do stand-up." And you're like, and I find it really funny. So that's happened. Anyone who does a lot of comparing has had that comment like 1,000 times, and it's so once you get that enough, you realise, oh, this is why it's not. I can take the pressure off when I'm hosting, because a lot of them don't think I'm a stand-up. Everything I'm doing to them when I'm making them laugh, they are like, "Holy shit, this announcer's well funny."
Yeah, Bruce Buffer's just smashing it up here.
So it's wicked. It's almost like you can't lose unless you're obviously there are, if somebody's not very good at it, then you can be bad at it. But if you're somebody who's naturally relatively funny and confident and know what you're doing, you can really have a lot of fun comparing. You can get away with murder.
Yeah. It's human nature though for people to be drawn to or be more sensitive to like negativity as opposed to positive things. But when you personally, when you look back on your career now that you've had so far, when you think about the gigs you've had, do you remember the best gigs you've had? Are they the first thing you remember, or are you more drawn to the times that you struggled a bit on stage? Or
yeah, you definitely remember the bad ones. Like, and again, not in an arrogant way, but once you get to a certain level where you're decent at comedy, and your consistency goes right up, once you've done it. And if you're just, it's really hard to make it as a professional stand-up. So you've got to have, you've got to be funny enough that the bookers are booking you again. You've got to have a good enough gig the bookers book you again. You've got to constantly stay on your toes and be good enough and improve. That your bad gigs get really far between, and your good gigs, you tend to just be, your gigs, all your gigs essentially should be good to be making a living from it. So naturally, you only really remember the bad ones because they're the outliers that sneak up and they catch you off guard harder and harder. The better you are and the more consistent you are, then the bad gigs, they really catch you off guard because you can't prepare for it. You might be on a run of 50 gigs that have been, really good or solid. There might have been a couple that are a little bit, Sunday nighty where everyone's got, not much energy or whatever. But, you've not had a gig where you think people have walked away going, fucking hell, what was he doing? So
how do you come back from that then? When you do struggle on stage and have a really bad gig, how do you just have to get out there and do another one as quickly as possible?
Yeah. Luckily, again, when you're doing it full time, you always will have plenty of, your gigs, your diary books up a year in advance. So, you'll have a gig within a few days, but you go into that next gig with, that's when you feel a bit of pressure as well. Because you're like, if I died twice in a row, this could be the start of like the end. You know what I mean? This could be, I've lost it, mate.
Yeah. Am I a bad comedian?
Because I've seen comedians since I started out. I did my first gig like 15 years ago, whatever. Slightly over that now. Yeah, but I've been doing it for basically 15 years. And I've seen comedians in that time that when I started, I saw them and they were proper big hitting club comedians where, you would not want to be on after them because they were just going to wallop it. And in that 15 years, I've seen some of those people go from that to now. I would, if I was on a lineup with them, they'd be the person I'd pick to go afterwards because I know that I'm going to have a better gig than them because they've just lost a bit of their spark. And, I think you can fall out of love with it a bit and not even realise and start phoning it in a bit and stop writing new material. And naturally, I think, a lot of people invest a lot in it and think that I need to be on, Live at the Apollo, or I need to be hosting some television show week in, week out. And if they don't get that, I think they sort of start resenting stand-up a bit and start seeing it just as it's a job now, isn't it? I'll just show up and do enough to get by and get rebooked, and then that's it. And I think, so I've seen it happen to some really, really funny people that just aren't really, their head's not in the game anymore. So there is that as a risk.
I mean, it's a bit like a football team, I suppose. Eventually, that it's no longer a bad streak. You're just like a bad team. I know that probably sounds harsh to say, but you know what I mean.
Me and my friends, I've got some of my old schoolmates. There's 5 of us. Have got a FIFA Pro Clubs team that we play on Xbox. So, for anyone who doesn't know what Pro Clubs is, basically on Xbox Online, you can create a team and each basically you pick just one player, so you're controlling one person in one position. And me and my mates got FIFA like 7 or 8 years ago and started playing online together. And we used to be, I don't know what, we were just well good. We just had this vein of form that we ended up getting. One season we got up into Division 1, which out of like the hundreds of thousands of teams on Xbox Live, we were in like the top, something mad, like top 1,000.
Wow.
And we were just solid. We just knew what we were doing. And then just as years have gone by, it might be that we've all got a bit older and genuinely our heads aren't in the game and we don't play it as regular. We play it like once every couple of weeks. But we just, the last maybe year, whenever we play it, we just aren't very good. And it took a long time for us to realise it was because we just weren't very good anymore. Like there was arguments, there was days when it was like, no, this team we're playing is shit. We're not having the luck. And it's just recently, we're now like we're in like Division 5 at the minute, which is crap. And we're just like, we've just accepted it. We've like a few players have stopped playing because they just couldn't hack it. And it is that moment we all basically have to have a word of ourselves and go, look, we're a Division 4 team who are, that's it. Division 3 we might get up to now and again, but then we'll get relegated the first season we're up there. You just got to accept it. That's your ability.
Sounds like you need a new motivational Harry Redknapp type manager to come in and save it.
Recently, comedian Chris Martin, who lives in LA, and I used to do a podcast with him. He's like one of my best mates. He's recently bought an Xbox in LA and got FIFA, so he's just transferred to the team. So we're hoping he's going to inject a bit of vitality into the dressing room.
You heard it here first. Mega new signing, Chris Martin signs.
For God's Children. That's the name of our club. It was called, we called it God's Children in the first season we ever set up for some reason. And in the next season we called it that again, but for some reason we forgot the D, so it was God's Children. And it's just stuck. That's our name.
I do love playing pro clubs, but there is always a player or two that are clearly the reason you lose most games, and it's quite hard to bring that up.
It's the only time me and my mates genuinely get a bit shitty with each other. A lot of us have known each other since we were like 5 or 6 years old, and there's times when we're all having a laugh and we're having and there's times when there's not a single word being spoken because all of us are thinking, like, if I say this, it will upset that person because, I've got, one of my mates is just, because you can call for passes, and he's one of these people that will call for a pass just when one of our defenders is trying to play it out as, near, on the edge of our box, and he's on the halfway line. He's calling for a pass. It's like, mate, our players are not good enough to make that pass. They're going to give it away. They're going to score, and then we're going to have a fucking argument. So there's some really passive aggressive. My mate Paul's the worst for it because he's naturally the best at it. Like he can actually do skills and stuff.
Yeah.
But also he's greedy, and he'll do, rather than make a simple pass to somebody in a decent position, he'll end up doing 8 Cruyff turns on the edge of the box. And he's got this amazing ability of being passive aggressive where if somebody has a particularly bad game, they won't say to him, you were shit. What he'll do at the end of the match, he'll go, do you want to maybe drop back into midfield or something? You're like, I know what you're saying, mate.
There is always one player doing loads of skills. On my club, that's James McGowan, if you're listening. Atrocity of too many Cruyff turns, mate. Just too many Cruyff turns. But going back to the world of comedy, I'm not sure if this sounds naive. I don't know too much about the world of a comedian and the relationships comedians have with each other, either on the circuit or on TV appearances. But sort of a mental health tip: has comedy ever been the cause of a wobble in your mental health, or the victim maybe of mental health
I think
problems?
both during different periods of time. Like I think during probably the worst periods I've been through, comedy has been it has been the cause and also some of the saviors of it as well, in the sense of if you're going through a tricky time, suddenly spending a lot of time on your own on the road can be horrendous. It's like if you're in a depressed period of your life and suddenly you find yourself in a hotel in Grimsby, some shitty B&B, with like a single bed that's all that hard sheets, and there's a little telly in the corner. It's not working. Everything could just feel a bit on top of you and a bit oppressive, and also that loneliness on the road. Sometimes if you're in a really happy place, that solo time on the road can be really beneficial, and you can use it for a lot of good stuff and thinking and reading, and you can feel very productive with it, and you can be thankful that, oh shit, I've got loads of time where I can do stuff that most people don't get the luxury to do. But yeah, so it's that sort of extremes. I think it can either be the worst thing about being a comedian or the best thing about being a comedian.
Do other comedians sort of understand that about each other, or is it sort of not spoken about?
It's not particularly. I mean, I think, I remember sort of in probably, there was a good few years where I reckon, I think mates would have known what I was going through, but I didn't find myself regularly sitting in dressing rooms talking about it to comedians who might not have been I might not have been that close to or anything, So I think you tend to just suck it up a bit, and I think only your mates in comedy will really know that, oh right, he's having a bit of a tough time of it. So yeah, it's but everyone's cool. It is a nice industry on the whole. There's not. I think I probably would have assumed it was much worse than it is before I did comedy. In terms of egos and people like digging each other out on that. And on the whole, it can be quite cliquey. It's almost like school years. You're in your year and you've got your mates, and there'll be a few people from other years you might know. But yeah, on the whole, it's sort of you get your gang, and then that's you're really tight with them. But you sort of actually get on with everyone, and there's only ever really a few dickheads knocking around. It's nowhere near as egotistical as people would think.
Yeah. Moving on to the podcast world, you're quite prolific in, stretching back like nearly over 10 years ago, wasn't it? The comedy podcast with your podcast wife, Chris Martin.
Yeah, I remember we were one of the first ones to start out doing podcasts, like just in the UK, that is, like just a couple of comedians having a chat. But I mean, we were doing it before there was even there was the affordable home technology to do it. Like we used to just sit either side of a laptop and just talk into it. That was the early days. It was horrible. And then
obviously you've got Two Vegan Idiots with Julian, your podcast mistress, maybe.
Yeah.
Babysitting Trevor, a comedian called Carl drinking coffee, which is quite nice. That's nice morning company. Yeah. But do these podcasts do they serve a purpose to you as well as the listeners? Like, is it just as much for you?
I think some, yeah. So they definitely, I think they do actually. They give you a different outlet, I think. Like me and Julian's one, that is, like the one with me and Chris started it because we used to write a lot together. We'd sit down over a coffee every week and we'd just throw around some ideas that we were working on, and some of it would never go to ever anywhere near the stage, you know what I mean? Yeah. Some of it though would be like, oh, that's got some legs, let's give that a try, and we'd just talk it through. And we used to just, and because we were mates, we'd always just make each other laugh a lot. And then, I think we'd heard, I can't remember what American podcast it was. It was like one of the first comedy American podcasts. And we were like, oh, why don't we do one of this? Why don't we weekly, when we sit around just coming up with ideas, why don't we actually just record it and have a laugh and just put it out as like a 25-minute thing? And it became almost like a little writing session. We'd always come off the back of it going, oh, that thing you said was really funny. You should write that in your book. And that sort of carried on for a while. And then with Julian, it sort of carried on with that. But what's happened now, I think it's a different dynamic with Julian than it was with Chris, in that Julian makes me laugh more than any other human being on earth. Like he's so consciously funny, but also unconsciously funny at the same time, which is weird. Like he's got the best comic timing of any comedian I know on earth. I mean, I've traveled the world. He's almost to a pathological degree. Like he's one of these people that he cannot stop himself saying the funniest thing. Like even if it's the worst timed thing, you could be telling him that your gran had just died, and if he has a funny thing in his head to say about it, he will say it, regardless of the timing of like how it might make you feel. He has to say the joke. And it makes him so funny, but it's almost impossible to get through a conversation with him.
Yeah.
So I find the sort of benefits I get out of doing the podcast with Julian is I genuinely spend a lot of it just laughing. And then I sort of do the edit. So I miss half of them because he's so like, he'll say something every 5 seconds when you're telling a story. And you'll hear every other one and laugh. But then when I have to edit it, and sometimes I have to skip through to see if there's anything that might have been dodgy, I'll be laughing at the ones I missed. So like, I genuinely get the benefit of just he cracks me up on it gives me a real laugh every time we do it. And the babysitting Trevor one again, that was just a concept that was quite just creatively fun to do because again that comes from just having a very eccentric friend and him not really knowing what to do or having an outlet. So what me and Chris did was give Trevor a sort of vehicle where we could just showcase him in his eccentric glory.
Yeah.
And the other the little coffee one I sort of don't really think of because that's a little just experiment I started doing at the start of this year where it's like, it's only 10, 12 minutes long and it's 3 times a week and it's me genuinely just having my morning coffee and talking out loud. So that I did that because at the start of the year I thought I'd love to see what it's like to just do one on your own because it sounds mental, doesn't it, to do a one-way conversation without any response at all. It'd be like doing stand-up without an audience.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to do it to see what it was like and if I could just maybe learn how to do that. So the benefit I'm getting from that is learning what it's like to just talk aimlessly, like stream of consciousness, without planning it. I don't sit there and think this is what I'm going to talk about. I just I sip my coffee and then start talking and press stop 12 minutes later. So it's become like a little practice session where I just learn a new skill.
It seems quite therapeutic though, because like even from listening, you can tell that you're just getting your thoughts of the day out in front of you, and then sometimes you sort of make sense of those thoughts. Like for me, I write quite a lot, just even on my laptop or writing down how I'm feeling, just because when it's all in your head, some of these thoughts get stuck together, and you're sort of giving them too much attention than they deserve.
Yeah, well, I think there is that as well. Like that's what the sort of forcing myself into doing it 3 times a week. Like quite early doors, it became Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and what I've found is having that. Like I've basically almost made an agreement with myself. You're going to do it on those days, unless there's something genuinely in the way. And I found on the days when I've not really felt it. Like there's only been a couple of times during this lockdown where I've woken up on a day and genuinely been like, oh man, this is fuck this. You know what I mean? Like in a sort of genuinely, this is now doing my head in. I've been pretty good at it and I've dealt with it very well. But I've had a couple of days where I've woken up like that. And like, one of them fell on Monday and I did the podcast actually saying it out loud and talking through going, oh, I just feel a bit shit and a bit, it was, even though I wasn't talking to anyone directly, it's just saying it out loud in the morning was like, all right, I know that's happened now. That's out in the world. It just does I suppose it was an outlet that I might not have had otherwise.
Yeah. You've talked about meditation as well on a few of the podcasts. I'd quite like to hear what it does for you, because I meditate a few times a week, not too often. Sometimes I really struggle to get into it. It just doesn't happen for whatever reason. Other times I come out feeling like a fucking god, feeling like I'm seeing the world for the first time. It's fucking, it's insane. Like colours feel different. It's mental. But yeah, what does it do for you?
It's that exact thing. I think there's times when I get so much out of it, and there's times where it feels like a bit of a frustrating experience. But I think the longer you do it, and the more regularly you do it, and the different types you might try, what they teach you is that you'll never ever get to a point where it's the same every time, and like it's you can have somebody who's done it for 30 years and is fucking living up in a monastery in Tibet. They'll still have days when they can't get settled and there's just something in their mind, you know what I mean? And I think that is part of it. That's part of the, getting to know yourself and getting to know your brain and how it works. And it's like exercise. That's what I think, that's the best way I think of describing it. Because I've had people that have told me they've tried meditating, they just couldn't settle their mind, or they say things like that, and it's like, well, what's it like when you take up an exercise? If you take up jogging on day 2, you don't go for a 20k run, do you? And even I know people that have run marathons, and they'll go for a 5k jog and be like, I just couldn't get into it today. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it is the fact is your mood, your body, how you slept. There's so many factors to how you're gonna be that day with anything you do. And I think meditation is really good for making you maybe realize where you're at that day. Like, sort of, I've been doing this meditation retreat thing this week with the London Buddhist Centre. They're doing it online, and I used to go down to the London Buddhist Centre on their afternoon meditation sessions now and again if I was in the area. They do just a free meditation session at 1:00 every day, and it's wicked actually. It's donation only, so like it's really beneficial for anyone in that area. And like, you don't have to know what you're doing. They split, basically. Normally there's about 30 or 40 people show up, and they split you into beginners or intermediate. And the beginners will actually be given a full hour-long guided meditation, and the intermediates who know what they're doing a bit will just be started, and they'll be bookended essentially, and they just do their own thing. But they're doing a week-long thing at the minute, and I've been doing it every morning. And a proper, like, normal, because I've not really been in the practice for ages now of doing like a set, right, 8 a.m. I'm doing 45 minutes to an hour or whatever. I'll just do it if and when I get the chance or when I feel like it. I'll do loads. Some days I'll do it. I'll sit on a train and do half an hour when I'm en route somewhere, or I just fit it in around my day. But this week I've been doing it at 8 every morning. And it's great. I mean, every day has been different. Yesterday was definitely the worst. Oh, no, not yesterday, day before. Tuesday, I had a real just frustrating hour. I just couldn't get into it. I was all over the shop. But what that taught me was, like, it made me realise that by 9:00, I was like, oh, right, I don't think I slept very well. I think I'm a bit sort of fidgety. So, today I need to probably just be wary of that and do a few things just to sort of keep my mood up, whatever. And actually just doing that meditation made me realise that if I hadn't have done it, I probably would have had that sense in me all day without knowing, and just felt a bit whereas actually I do meditation, really, it will highlight how you're feeling that day, and at least like, you got the heads up then to work with it.
I find that it's quite hard to convince people to get into it, to be honest. I've tried to get a few of my friends to meditate. Some of them I wouldn't bother doing that nonsense. It's like, all right, fucking Jeremy Clarkson, off you pop. And other people, like, I've tried it, but I just couldn't get into it. But it turns out they were trying to do like a 20-minute one on their first time. I was like, well, don't do that. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I don't feel in the mood, and I'll, even in like 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes, you can sometimes get an amazing buzz from it. So
yeah, I think there is definitely a cultural thing as well. Like, I've got one mate out of all my old mates from school and that does it, and like he does it properly. He's spent time in like Zen monasteries and stuff. But apart from him and me, that everyone else, and everyone had similar upbringings. They'd have had like working class, probably second generation immigrant upbringings where they come from backgrounds and families that probably weren't that conducive to getting into meditation. What I mean? That's the nature of it. So I think, and I had it, I reckon, it took me a bit of effort to get over my own voice of saying like, fucking, who do you think you are, mate? What I mean? Because you can't help it, because you think meditation and you think, we've got quite a weird view we think of it as like a middle class endeavor, whereas, it's not middle class, is it? It wasn't, even though I do Buddhist meditation, that wasn't invented by middle class white people, was it? What I mean? It's thousands of years old. And like, it's that thing of, I think once you've got to try and get your own judgment of it out of the way. And also there's so many different types. Find one that works for you. I've got a mate called John Hastings. He's a Canadian comedian. And John is one of the most, like, what's the word, like ADHD type people I know. He's and I don't know if that's a genuine sort of, if he's undiagnosed or something, but he constantly needs distraction. Like, I live with him in Edinburgh at the Fringe every year, and he's stressful to watch go about his day. Do you know what I mean? He'll be walking around the flat with his laptop in his hand, like with a film on. He'll have a podcast playing out of his phone, and he'll be making a smoothie, and there's so much noise, and somehow he just needs that to function. So he was asking about meditation, and I was like, I know for a fact he could not sit still and do half an hour of meditation or even 10 minutes of meditation quietly, because I don't think his brain genuinely could deal with it. But I recommended to him this Wim Hof meditation method, which is a breathing thing that you do that is actually really active, and like you basically almost hyperventilate yourself into a meditative state. And the reason I said to him, you need something like this because it feels like you're doing something. It doesn't. It's the opposite of what some people think meditation is, which is sitting really still and trying to calm your mind. So yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not. Meditation isn't sitting on a mountaintop with your legs crossed, going
yoga pants and dreadlock.
Yeah, there's shitloads of style. There's types of it that are pretty hardcore. Like that Wim Hof one makes you feel like you've just fucking come up on acid or something. And if you do it right, it's really like you do this heavy breathing in and out, and like it properly gets you into this hyperventilated state, and then you just stop, and then your body just like you feel like you're floating. So like that's, I'd recommend that to people that think meditation's a bit just sit there still, mate, and not think nothing.
Yeah, rather eat a fucking sausage sandwich, mate. What are you on about?
Yeah, but I get that. You know what I mean? That's sort of, it happens with loads of stuff, innit? Like when I went vegan, loads of my mates had that response of like, what, you can't eat sausages, can't even have a steak. And again they thought it was a middle class venture, and it was like, it's not. I'm doing it from a slightly spiritual perspective of like, there's been vegans for thousands of years in India, you know what I mean? Like, I think white people can always think when somebody does something slightly different, somebody's going up in the world, isn't they? And it's like, we get a bit of a egotistical view that we started everything.
Yeah, definitely. And we were inadvertently vegan when we were back in early evolution, to be honest, because we didn't really have much of a choice.
Well, our meat intake was based on if we could catch a fucking saber-toothed tiger once a month or something, you know what I mean? People act like that. People go like, no, mate, I eat meat because we're top of the food chain. Or they act like them walking to Asda is fucking going out hunting or something. It's like, couldn't be further. Like, you're not a Neanderthal, mate. You're not a caveman. You've just ordered your shit on Ocado, mate. Don't try and tell me that you're some hunter-gatherer.
Do you find that your diet helps your mental health? Because I find this a lot, and I wish I respected this earlier, but when I eat healthily, like, it makes a massive difference to my headspace. And I wish I knew that years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and also, but sometimes though, you know that, and but there's still short-term benefits to just eating shit, innit? Like, it's that thing. I know for a fact when I'm eating well, at the minute, the last 2 weeks, and again, this sounds like I'm king of the hippie, like, fads, but I've been doing that intermittent fasting thing where I only eat between certain hours. So I'm only eating between midday and 8 p.m. And everything, I don't have anything other after 8 p.m. I don't have anything other than water, or I might have like a herbal tea. And before 12 in the morning, nothing but water. And I do that whenever I get into bad habits. If I'm going through habits of like late night, a bit of toast before bed sort of stuff, and just eating a bit too much, I push myself out of it and do that intermittent fasting, because it's quite an extreme. Like, I've got to put boundaries on everything to say, right, just do this for a bit to get out of your bad habits. And I've been doing it for 2 weeks. I feel wicked. Like, I'm sleeping better. I'm waking up with more energy. And it's just that thing of, when if you're eating like sugar late at night and stuff, and naturally your sleep ain't going to be as good, and that will just have a knock-on effect during your day. You'll feel a bit more lethargic. Then you'll need something sugary to give you a short-term energy boost. And you actually looked at what you put in your body, and then it's like with booze, isn't it? I've gone through phases of being, I'd say, almost a high-functioning alcoholic. You know what I mean? Where I've just drank all the time. And I don't know if I'm not in the mornings, but I would say I've gone through phases where I've drunk every evening for months, and and then suddenly you're wondering why you're feeling sad during the day, and you might be slightly more anxious than normal, And it's like, why do you think, mate? You've literally got alcohol in your blood
Yeah.
system every morning. You've got that sort of shivery booze blues thing. I think a lot of people don't sometimes equate the two. They might say, "Oh, I suffer from anxiety," and then they talk about needing medication. It's like, you probably just need to stop taking MDMA every week. It's probably just look at your lifestyle. Just that should be the first port of call, isn't it? When you're somebody who's going through a period of mental health problems. I was guilty of this. I've been medicated in the past. I've done therapy and everything, but I think we're very quick to look for a medicinal fix rather than. I think the first thing you should look at is your lifestyle. What your circumstances. Like, if you're feeling depressed at the minute and you're like, I think I've got depression, I need to go on tablets. If you look at your lifestyle and suddenly realize you're in a relationship that you hate, and and you're in a job you don't enjoy, if you looked at those things, and obviously you're going to be depressed. You're not happy. That's what depression is. Depression is a lack of fulfillment in your life. But I think we're very quick to go, well, what I'll do is, rather than address those, I'll just take some tablets and then just let them continue. So you're numbing yourself to the reality that you're not happy. And I did that for years, and it wasn't until I actually sorted my shit out that was causing the depression that I suddenly, when I came off antidepressants, I was like, oh, right, now they've gone, I feel much better about my life. And the fact that I was being a bit more active and eating a bit better, and I'd cut my drinking down, I'd stop taking drugs all the time. And I suddenly had this moment of realization that, I think I've actually ironed out a lot of the creases that are causing my depression. And I think, it's very easy to say I'm a depressive and that's a lot. I suffer from anxiety and that's it. Then that sounds like you've got a disease that is terminal, essentially. Whereas if you say, I'm going through a period of depression and anxiety, but if I sort out a bunch of things, I think it might go away, then it's much more hopeful way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah. When I came off antidepressants not too long ago, and I was nervous about it because I thought, oh, when you take these pills away, like everything's just gonna collapse in again. But when I was on them, I didn't just take them. I used that time whilst my head was in a good enough space to address things that could have been causing me issues elsewhere. So I'm so glad I did that, because I just came off them with ease. I thought it would be like side effects and I'd get really anxious. Not at all. I was really surprised.
Well, that's what they meant. That's what they're there for. I think a lot of people don't realise that, and I think a lot of people aren't given that advice. And that's not sort of taking or not having a go at medical professionals, but no doctor ever told me that when I was on antidepressants, a doctor never said to me, you need to sort out the shit that's making you depressed. Not a single doctor. I know that not in those terms would they say it, but I had to work that out, and I did it. And then also I had to really fight to get, obviously, I got a therapy through the NHS, which I know is obviously the funding's an issue, but I had to ask for therapy. When I first went in, I was pretty much suicidal when I first finally went to a doctor to discuss maybe being put on medication. And, and I know that the doctors have got limited time with every patient as well, so I'm very understanding of that. But that doctor should at least give me the option of therapy. Do you know what I mean? I think that I think they first were like, this guy's in a lot of trouble. Let's get him on some pretty heavy dosage antidepressants, and that's absolutely what they should have done. But I also think that therapy should have been mooted at some point. It wasn't. It took probably 6 months for me to say, all right, these have leveled me out. I'm starting to sort out a few things now that I think are good for my future. But I then said, I think I need to actually look at some of the causes for this that might be a bit more historic, and try and maybe talk to a professional about that. And then they finally, put me in a system to see if I could get some therapy. And even then, it took a couple of therapists for me to find the right one. Yeah. So, that was another one that I don't think enough people have the access to. Because I'd say without doing therapy, I don't think I would have probably got to this point as quick as I have, being pretty chilled and, not yeah, I think I got found out a lot of stuff in therapy that I'd carried along with me from childhood
Hmm.
that, was horrible, really. Having sort of a resentment towards your own parents for how they were, it's a horrible thing to really carry with you, isn't it? But then therapy sort of gave me a bit more of an awareness that my parents had also got their own issues, so it's not their fault. They were just going through their own stuff, weren't they?
Yeah.
So actually, I think a lot of people just should go into therapy that probably don't get offered that option.
So is that how you got to that point then, when your mental health was maybe at its worst? It was just a build up of past experiences and stuff like that.
I think so. I think it was a mix of everything. I think the actual main cause was lifestyle. I was in. Me and my ex-wife were. We worked very hard to maintain a relationship that probably was making us both pretty ill.
Mm.
We really did. A lot of people I think are very quick to give up on a relationship. It feels a bit shit. I'm out of here. We did the opposite. I think we tried everything. We did couples therapy, everything. Like we really tried everything we could, but actually we couldn't probably see for a good few years that what we should have done earlier was just not be together. We were the cause of each other's issues.
Mm.
So there was that, and there was just other lifestyle things and family things, and I just had a lot that like this the lifestyle things at the time were we should have ended that relationship, and I should have gone off and just had some time alone and had to think about myself for a bit, and not felt guilty all the time. I was always feeling guilty about being in a relationship I didn't want to
Mm.
be in, and how I was acting because of that. So once that was out of the way, then it was like, right, I've got the main sort of issue of the moment out of the way. What else is going on that's caused a lot of those my issues? And I think, yeah, it was quite quickly I worked out it was childhood stuff. My parents are pretty, my mum's always had issues, like serious mental health issues for my whole childhood, and her whole family does. She comes from a really rough, tough childhood herself. So I never really gave that much thought. I always thought the way she acted when I was young was just almost, I just thought she was being selfish. She wasn't a good mum. And actually, I think it took me going through some bad life shit and then getting therapy to realize that she was going through some tough things when I was
Mm.
young. So I just suddenly had a bit more compassion to her, suddenly released a lot of the resentment. And my dad was just old and a bit, he was 43 when I was born, and he's just not that sort of paternal type. I mean? When I was growing up, my dad was not the type to play with me or any of that stuff. It was almost like having this old bloke in the corner who just, hardly spoke to him really, because he just didn't know
Mm.
how to. He didn't know how to communicate with kids. He's not that type of person who could do that kiddie fun chat. So I think, but I just never really got to know him. And I think also in the last 5-10 years, as he's become really old, he's really relaxed into himself, and he's now a much warmer, nicer person. And I think that had to happen before me to go, oh yeah, he just wasn't. That wasn't his type. He just didn't have the personality type to be a fun dad you'd go for a kick down the park with.
Mm.
So it's just that sort of stuff. You carry all that stuff with you, and you just get to an age sometimes you're like, oh right, they were just grown ups who had loads of shit going
Hmm.
on.
Yeah, we can be very quick to sort of blame or say that, or to blame our circumstances without really observing why those circumstances are how they are.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to see your parents as people rather than just your
Mm.
parents, isn't it? You forget that. That's such a moment I think that people have. And I don't know. I reckon I was in my 30s before I realised that I stopped judging my parents as my parents and thought about them as individuals
Mm.
who had loads of baggage and had tough things going on, and financial problems when we were growing up. And like, I suddenly was like, shit, man. The fact that I turned out all right and functioning, they actually probably did the best with what they were going through at the time.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that therapy taught me that, but that would have taken a long time to probably work out without a good therapist.
Yeah, I think it does for a lot of people, to be fair. Sort of as we sort of come towards the end of this episode, I'd like to do a few, not quick fire, but slightly faster paced questions regards to your mental health. Um, what are the main things that cause you stress and anxiety?
Well, nowadays, not much actually. Since I've, got entered into a much more relaxed lifestyle, and I don't drink as much, and yeah, I mean, I drink very rarely nowadays, and I
Mm.
meditate, and I'm quite philosophical about everything. I find now actual big life stuff doesn't really stress me out. Even when like with the lockdown, my finances, I'm sort of essentially not going to be earning money for months. I've got a little bit that will tide me over, but I'm at the poorest I've been probably for a decade, and I don't know why, but it's not stressing me out. And I think it's
Yeah, that's
because
amazing though.
but I think it is that thing of just be like I've found a way of being very philosophical about everything and realizing that normally things turn out all right. So the things I get stressed about now are just the most. It's only ever little tedious, daily, you know, things you'll mess up. Yesterday, I tried to make a garlic dip and it went wrong. That's the thing that annoyed me yesterday. So I'll find myself now, I'll get stressed in a moment about a very small, annoying admin thing, your laptop, if something crashes. But weirdly, when it comes to big things, I feel like, oh, I'm actually now, I've found a relative level of calmness that I feel ready to cope with most things.
That is amazing, mate. That is great. What's your biggest fear in life?
Fear. I suppose. I mean, at the minute, it's a genuine life thing. Is that my wife is due to give birth next month, and
Mm.
She's had a really lovely, easy pregnancy. It's been nice. It's been really amazing to watch her enjoy her pregnancy and not. She's not had that sort of. You hear some people like get really stressed with it, and it's really difficult physically, and that's it must be so hard. But she's really breezed through it. So I suppose my only fear at the minute is just the baby being born, everything being fine, healthy, an easy birth, so not too medical, not too much intervention. And so I think at the minute, that's my main one. That is every
Mhm.
now and again, I'll think, right, I'll just hope it just goes really smoothly and there's no complications.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And last question, I always like to try and end on some positive reflection. What about yourself are you most proud of?
I mean, it probably differs day to day. I'd say from what we've talked about, I think it is genuinely the fact that I would not have assumed a decade ago that I would be who I am today, like happy and calm and settled, and not somebody who is prone to just a blowout of you
Mm.
know volcanic proportions. That used to be my way of doing things. I was always relatively calm on the surface. I think people would look at me and be like, "Oh, he seems like a chilled guy," but what would happen was inside everything was building and building, and then I'd just have a blowout and I'd go and do something stupid,
Mhm.
and then it'd be, then I'd have guilt, and that would be a horrible come down off that, and then it'd be like, right, I've reset, and now let's do that again, and that was almost like my life, up and down constantly. And I feel like the fact that I sort of have sorted out what I needed to for me to function well and calmly and comfortably. Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm pretty proud that, because I did some things that probably had benefits and some things that didn't. I really went off and I went traveling, and I did all the wanky things, but I also did the medical things as well. And I went off and drank bloody ayahuasca tea with a shaman, and I did all sorts of mad shit to try and find out what was wrong with me.
Mhm.
And ultimately, they all had benefits, but what I essentially had to do was just let a bunch of stuff go and
Yeah.
learn some sort of way of philosophically looking at the world as not a place to stress me out.
Mhm. Amazing, mate. Thank you so much for joining me on the Football and Feelings
No
podcast. It's
worries.
great to hear the place that you're in now compared to where you were before. It really is. It's encouraging, and I'm sure it will help
Yeah.
people listening as well.
I hope so. That's if I could say one bit of advice, it's genuinely that it's a bit of hard work, but actually it's way more doable than you think of it
Mhm.
being at the time when you're at your lowest. It feels like that, it would be impossible to not be in that place, and actually you just got to commit to it, and really, find out what in your life is causing the pain, and if you get rid of that, you'll be surprised how quick you can start getting on an even keel.
And it is always worth it. Thank you very much, Carl. I'll post your social
man.
media links in the description as well, so people can find you. Thank you very much for listening to the Football and Feelings podcast. Cheers.